telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
This is James O'Neill. President Trump said he is not rushing negotiations with Iran and will only accept an agreement that meets U.S. objectives. In a Fox News interview, President Trump said a poor deal would not be acceptable and warned that the conflict could be resolved a different way if diplomacy fails.
Slowly, very tough negotiators. It takes a long time. I'm in no hurry. I'd like to say I'm in a hurry because, gasoline prices are going to come tumbling down. But if you're going to be in a hurry, you're not going to make a good deal. And slowly but surely, we're getting, I think, what we want. And if we don't get what we want, we're going to end it a different way.
Ukraine and Russia exchanged accusations following overnight attacks that targeted energy infrastructure and areas near the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Russian officials said Ukrainian drones set fire to a fuel storage facility in the Rostov region and damaged infrastructure in Saratov, while Ukraine denied Russian claims that it struck the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia plant, calling the allegation a propaganda effort. Russia's Rosatom said a drone damaged part of a turbine hull, but did not affect key equipment. International Atomic Energy Agency Director General Rafael Grossi expressed concern and called for verification. Meanwhile, Ukraine reported intercepting most of the nearly 300 drones launched by Russia overnight. Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles said Australia will simplify the AUKUS submarine program by purchasing 3 second-hand Virginia-class nuclear-powered submarines rather than a mix of new and used vessels.
In the context of a very complicated endeavour, we need to place a premium on simplicity.
Marles said using submarines of the same type will reduce complexity, improve maintenance, and provide operational benefits for crews. The change is also expected to be more cost-effective, although it will not significantly alter overall defense spending. The decision comes amid concerns about U.S. submarine production capacity and Australia's need to replace its aging Collins-class fleet before those vessels retire from service. Bosnia and Herzegovina is experiencing a sharp rise in illegal migration, with arrivals increasing 67.5% during the first 4 months of 2026, compared with the same period last year. Authorities have conducted multiple operations targeting migrant smuggling networks moving people, primarily from Bangladesh and Pakistan, toward the Croatian border and the European Union. Europol recently dismantled a multinational smuggling organization that allegedly moved more than 600 migrants through Bosnia toward Slovenia, Austria, and Germany. The increase is straining Bosnia's reception centers and placing additional pressure on neighboring countries. Officials warn migration flows could increase further during warmer months, raising concerns across the Western Balkans and the European Union. Nigel Farage announced that a reform UK government will release all government files related to child grooming gang investigations from the past 40 years and increase funding for the National Crime Agency Task Force from £100 million to £400 million annually. Farage described the grooming gang scandal as a major state failure and argued that public officials, police, and politicians who enabled or ignored abuse should face greater scrutiny. The issue is expected to play a prominent role in the upcoming Makerfield by-election, where Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham faces criticism over his handling of the issue. Burnham's office rejected allegations of a cover-up and defended his record. A new French poll found that 72% of respondents believe crime in France is out of control, with majorities across most political groups expressing concern. The findings were strongest among supporters of center-right and National Rally parties, but also extended to many left-wing voters. The survey was released as France experienced widespread disorder following Paris Saint-Germain's Champions League victory, with Interior Minister Laurent Nunez reporting 780 arrests nationwide. This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
Well, now it is time for the Hall of Shame, where every week I name and shame. Coming in at number 1 this week, drum roll please, it's Greta's fake Gaza flotilla activists. Oh, you are going to love this one. The activists, from the bonking boat, the boat that rocked, the boat where they allegedly found drugs and condoms on board. Okay, well, they're now back in their own countries of origin. And you got to see this, okay? They're faking mistreatment. Now, I'm just going to roll this vision while we're on. So on the left-hand side here, she's in a neck brace. I can't talk, can barely talk. Well, suddenly there she is on the right-hand side. Whoa, emerging. She's leaped out of security at the airport. What an incredible turn of events. An incredible turn of events. Can you believe it? And greeted with flowers. So in a neck brace, while in Israel, can barely speak on the left-hand side, but just incredibly back on home soil and has made a miraculous recovery. How did she do it? Thank you, God. Thank you, God. And now I'm going to show you another clip as well. And it just seems to get worse, and it gets, quite frankly, actually more embarrassing, to be honest. Okay, so in this first clip that I'm showing you here, this is a bunch of men, okay? They've just landed in Turkey, okay? So they're walking, they're fine, right? They're fine. No problems here. Everything seems to be going accordingly. They're standing, walking straight. I mean, that looks normal to you, doesn't it? Looks normal to you? Okay. Well, now I'm going to show you this clip, right, of a couple of hours earlier. I'm just going to bring it up and just see what you notice might be a little bit different between the men. Oh dear. No way. No. They're being pushed around. They're being wheeled around because, well, they can't move apparently. They're just struggling. This is in Israel. The mistreatment that they allege. There they are on beds being wheeled around. Compare and contrast. But just, it's quite incredible, isn't it? The miraculous, I guess, revival that they've had. It's truly something to behold, that they've just managed to sort out their necks, their backs, to just be strolling along the airports. It's quite incredible. You know what might fix them? Go back on the boat, a bit of bonking, a couple of condoms here and there. That might fix all of your woes.
At the hands of Israeli forces.
I was dragged into a darkened container ship on a prison boat. I was sexually assaulted.
I can't think of how many times I was punched and kicked in the face.
He said, "You're too old to be alive. You need to die."
11 Australians were among hundreds on board boats bound for Gaza with food and medical supplies that were intercepted by Israeli forces in international waters.
Prisoners had been raped with dogs in Israeli prisons, and the response in the American media, to the extent there was response, was to accuse the writer of blood libel against all Jews. This is like accusing rabbis of poisoning wells. It was basically Nazi propaganda. That was the response. Does that sound plausible to you?
It does sound plausible. I did not hear any examples of that, but what I have heard about and what I've taken detailed testimonies of are some of the most appalling examples of torture. So one of my friends who was tortured for 60 days in a prison talked about how I've heard no examples of dogs raping the prisoners, but I have heard multiple examples of the dogs being used as weapons. You'll be familiar with the drone warfare. They're the quadcopters with cameras and guns. Well, they have dogs who are trained to go into the hospitals with cameras and guns on their back and attacking people. And my colleague, of whom I took a detailed testimony, has described that in great detail.
Dogs with guns on their backs?
Dogs with cameras and guns on their backs and being trained to go into hospitals and shoot people. And I've heard multiple examples of that. So
of a living dog.
Living dogs who are trained. They go in, they go into wherever, and then there's someone remotely controlling the camera and the guns, and then they are.
If you told me that it happened in a North Korean prison camp, I would have trouble believing you. You're saying the Israeli government did this.
Well, I'm telling you what I have taken testimony of a friend of mine who witnessed this on multiple occasions.
We have engaged with Israeli forces, that is to say, we've seen them. Unfortunately, our boat has not been intercepted. There have been over 34 boats intercepted, and those that have been on the boats have been arrested and taken to probably the prison, the Shayatet 13 prison ship. So we are pleading with people to pressure the governments. First of all, find out which boats, which people were intercepted, and then pressure their consulates to visit them and to get them released as soon as possible. Anyway, I'm here on our boat, and we are hopeful that we can break the siege, go through the People's Corridor, and bring in vitally needed humanitarian aid. But the most important thing is we are showcasing the Palestinian struggle to the world. This is what it is. The Israelis do not want people bringing humanitarian aid, which is in violation of international law. In 2024, the International Court of Justice made a provisional decision that Israel cannot impede the entrance of humanitarian aid to Gaza. This is exactly what it is doing. It is in international waters on the one hand, which has no right to intercept a boat that's legally there, our boat, bringing in humanitarian aid, violating that 2024 provisional measure by the International Court of Justice. And even if we were to break the siege in so-called Israeli waters, the blockade that the Israelis have set up prevents humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza, and so it also violates international law to impede us, to intercept us, to stop us from going to Gaza. And God willing, we'll be with our brothers and sisters in Gaza very soon. And alhamdulillah, we will be able to embrace our brothers and sisters, bringing them support, and be able to share with them the idea that the world has not forgotten Gaza. On the contrary, they're working hard and will never give up to help Palestinians free Gaza, because they are helping the world, the oppressed people of the world, to resist and to free themselves. Thank you.
With your help, we can continue to fight for freedom, reach new audiences, and bring important information to the public free of charge. This is not possible without your generosity. Join our quest for the truth and our freedom and donate today, telling it as it is. This is today's News Talk, The World Today.
And welcome back to the World Today. No protagonists. We're going to start mixing these up with some one-on-one interviews or conversations. That's what they are, about particular things. And before I go into my intro to Dr. Frank Romano, you saw that clip there that went for about 7 minutes. I played the first 2 minutes on what our one of our news networks in Australia, also with the UK, and aligned with Fox. And you saw that absolute tripe, that disgusting tirade from that so-called presenter or journalist. And then you saw the truth, and you heard the truth. And we're going to talk about that with Frank very shortly, because the absolute abomination of the truth and the distortion of it is unbelievable. Bottom line is, you do not kill innocent people. Children, mothers, wives, families. You do not do that. In my opinion, you go to hell and don't pass go. Just go straight to hell and rot there for eternity. That's why I played that. Our guest today is Dr. Frank Romano, who earned a PhD at University of, I'll do this right, at Paris. And it was the Paris Panthéon Sorbonne. He is a member of the California and Marseille Bars. He represents the Palestinian people before the ICC. He's a peace and freedom activist and has organised many demonstrations in Palestine, Israel and the United States against the Israeli occupation. Frank's an author of Love and Terror in the Middle East, and that's the 5th edition. Frank has seen, he's been on so many trips, he must have some frequent flyer points now for visiting jails, but we'll talk about that too shortly. But he's seen firsthand how Israel treats protesters and has spent time in Israeli detention. Frank was deported from Israel in 2019 for defending a Bedouin village, al-Ahmar, from destruction by an Israeli bulldozer. He was the owner of the Handala and a participant on the vessel that sailed in July 2025, to break the Israeli siege of Gaza. Now, Frank was captured and imprisoned on that occasion. He was captured again for his participation on the Global Sumud Flotilla, which departed Barcelona on April 12, 2026. We're going to talk to Frank about the most recent abductions of the Global Sumud Flotilla in international waters and the violence perpetrated against many of the participants for wanting to help those who need help. And what of Gaza now? There is an intractable fight in Iran. What's going to happen? Will the Middle East do what they've done of late and ignore it, or will it become a focal point, which it should be, on human suffering, the abomination of human rights, life, and everything good? It's the abomination of it, which is just a disgusting state of affairs. Dr. Frank Romano, thank you for joining me. First of all, I want to get your comment on that first part of the clip we played on, and what she is saying is typical of what is being said in most free-to-air or legacy media or mainstream media, but also a lot of independent, which I've come across, so-called journalists are also chanting the same tune. That was a piece of shit, and I apologise for saying that word, but it was a piece of shit, and she should be sacked. What's your thoughts on that sort of reporting? And it doesn't do any good, does it?
No, it doesn't, because, well, when people see this type of reporting, and then the witnesses come under, penalty of perjury to testify that what really happened, the gratuitous violence and torture that took place after I was involved in the 2 interceptions this time, and after the first, we went into this torture ship and so forth. What I'm getting at, to answer your question directly, Mike, is look at all this time and effort put into this false propaganda. It must indicate to people, and we need to bring it to their attention, that if a country is spending all this time and effort to spin the truth, then you know there's a huge cover-up. You know that they're completely embarrassed, and as moderator was saying, embarrassed, and not only embarrassed, are realizing, the Israeli government are realizing they're starting to really lose those people that are on the fence about shifting from the discussion stage of what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank and in the world to direct action. And they're very concerned. And the second thing I'd like to note, Mike, and we can get into this later, the absolute vicious and over-the-top violence, in particular after the second interception of the Global Sumud Flotilla boats, indicates to me, and even as we were being tortured, that the Israel is very much finally worried. We're getting to them now. The flotilla is actually getting to them. We have helped showcase the Palestinian struggle more and more, because when we left Barcelona way back in the 15th of April, there was very little press involved with showcasing what the struggle of the Palestinian people. And yet, after this false ceasefire, Mike, the attacks against Gaza, the killings in Gaza and the West Bank, the taking of land in the West Bank, settler attacks and so forth, has been ongoing even more, because Israel always benefits from these distractions of the world focusing on other conflicts like the Iranian conflict. And so it brings home the point, that we are getting to them, this vicious violence, and we'll get into the details. It just, including, I was tortured directly, and but other people were subjected to a lot more serious injury than I was, that they really are concerned about the flotilla continuing, because this was a very strong effort to deter us from continuing to organize boats and land convoys, but in particular boats to Gaza.
It's I have to say, I've had that for the last week and a half, and I've been just fuming about what legacy media is reporting on. And it does show you that the information operation is going particularly well. But it's controlled by, at this stage, by the US and by Israel. I'm not too sure which is stronger. I think it's a joint partnership, the old handshake here. We're in this together, which I've heard before on other occasions. I think during COVID, we're in this together. The US and Israel are in this together. and it does open up some questions, which we'll talk about later. Can you just tell me about the flotilla and the participants? These terrible people that went over, one, to create the awareness of the atrocities, and two, to help. I mean, you were armed with food, medical aid, probably corny jokes. I mean, you guys were just terribly dangerous. Tell me about this group of terrorists that were going there to save people's lives and bring medical aid and food and have bad jokes.
Yeah, well, I guess you could say I'm well placed to be able to assess this, Mike, because started out in Istanbul, a couple of years ago, then went to Malta, was on the Madeleine till he kicked me off and to put on a journalist because he didn't have enough, and then I was on the Handala, as you suggested. I was on the first, I don't think you did mention, I was on the first Global Sumud Flotilla mission as well as this last two missions that were intercepted. This time, well before the launch date, which was supposed to be beginning of April or so, we actually ended up leaving around April 15th. I spent 3 weeks in Barcelona working on the boat, so I was there early. So I got to meet a lot of people, and we had lots of discussions, and believe me, I would say 99.5% of those people I met in Barcelona were really sincerely trying to do something about a genocide taking place in our time. Because we've all discussed, former genocides, including these people in Barcelona. And we've talked about the Inquisition, we've talked about the Crusades, the My Lai massacre, and Pinochet's massacre in Chile, past massacres. But today, a lot of people that, many people that when we're discussing what's happening in Gaza kind of avoid the idea of a genocide and massacre because they're nervous. They know that this is the type of thing we can actually do something about. It's happening before our eyes, and yet hesitation because we know we can do something and we're not doing anything. So these people I've met all across the board, all social economic classes, professions, had one main common denominator. They really sincerely feel that in spite of the challenges, and we all have a lot to lose, we have children, we have jobs, and this extended visits often make people lose their jobs because they said, well, I'll be back in a month, and we're back in 2 months. It takes a long time, and the rough seas and all these interceptions. Really wanted to make it right, really see that there's a genocide happening in our time that we can try to do something about, and decided that one of the ways we can do this, because we're in a position to do it, not everyone can apply direct action, is we can do this as direct action to apply a pressure on Israel and its accomplices like the U.S. To stop in continuing this genocide, as well as what's happening in the West Bank, taking land, supporting settlers, and attacking Palestinians. All this is all together. We really want to make a statement and bring in world attention back to the suffering of the Palestinian people, because way back when even the launch date, around the 13th, 15th of April, there was very little press, and it's not about us, not like the glory of interviews. We really want to be a conduit to have the world look through us to Palestine and refocus. And we did succeed after several weeks on the sea, and then maybe after the first interception around April 30th by Israeli forces. Finally, world attention is focused back on Palestine, and the fact. And the aberrant thing that we can talk about later, Mike, is why is the world finally waking up to the absolute gratuitous, vicious violence of the Israelis, much like American policemen that are trained by the Israelis, when non-Palestinians are subject to it. Now people are waking up to the fact, geez, we came back with broken bones, broken ribs, serious concussions, serious hospital time, and now people are waking up and starting to believe how the Palestinians have been treated since 1948, have been witnessing this awful treatment, even worse treatment, and yet people didn't believe them. So this is sort of the aberration, but we're welcome world attention, but why do they again have to wait until non-Palestinians are viciously, over the top, violently treated, and when they're bringing in humanitarian aid, when Palestinians have been treated this way for years?
Tell me this. Actually, first of all, before we get into that, I want to know if you wouldn't mind just sharing your experience from the moment you were abducted by the Israelis on your last trip. You do many of these trips, as I mentioned. You're collecting frequent flyer points, and I don't want those. I do not want those points. I love frequent flyer, but not your ones. But tell me what happened from the moment they abducted you, because we've seen on that clip I played before, one lady, they said, you are too old. You need to die, basically. I mean, that is a terrible thing, especially if you're surrounded by soldiers who are very experienced in shortening one's life. So tell us the actual procedure, if you wouldn't mind, in a fairly, not a real short space of time, but because I need to ask you other questions before everyone goes to sleep.
Yeah, well, just starting off the last mission, we got a real taste of it because Ben Gvir said, we are going to treat these activists like real terrorists, because they are terrorists. And so they threw us on the ground last time on the hot ground in these terrible positions for a long time. And then we were processed. This time, since the interception off the island of Crete was about 700 nautical miles from Israel, the Israelis were not going to do like they usually do. They occupy the boats and put us in the bow or in a corner of the boat, and then they drive the boat all the way to Ashdod port. This time, since we were so far away, they had this torture. It really was a torture boat set up to quotes unquotes welcome us. So right away, when we were intercepted, some boats, and we're fast forwarding to the second interception. Some boats were immediately with their people. They were shooting these the water cannons at them, but they were also shooting plastic coated bullets at them and other types of weapons. Even when they were on the boat, I had a friend, Yazin, who was shot in the nose with a plastic coated bullet, and I could see blood all over his nose. Unfortunately, it didn't hit his eye because it would have taken his eye out, or if it hit a certain part of his brain, it could have given him serious brain damage. It could have killed him. So even after, without leaving the boats, there were some boats that were targeted for violence, and people were thrown on the floor and so forth when the boat was intercepted by Israeli commandos. But let's now, once the boats were intercepted by the Israeli commandos, we were taken in these small boats to the torture ship. And the torture ship was something you couldn't imagine. As soon as we get off the Reeb, the small ship boat with the commandos taking us onto there, it's a commando boat. It's a Shaitat 13 commando boat. So it's the same commandos that intercepted us. We're in charge of the ship. We were thrown to the ground, required to crawl on our knees. They processed us. We were completely supposed to bowing down the whole time. And as soon as they threw me to the ground, they wanted me to walk. I could hardly walk. And so I tripped and fell, and then 4 soldiers grabbed each of my limbs and drugged me to the processing place where they're supposed to look at my passport, and just simply dropped me about from 3 or 4 feet above, right on the cement on my back, and threw my stuff on me. They had my stuff in a bag. That was our initiation to this torture ship. And then, once we were processed, we were actually thrown to the ground. We're supposed to bow down and then literally crawl or lightly walk, but we were bowing our head almost to the ground all the way to the container area. And there are like 4 containers in a circle, creating kind of a big cell. And inside the containers, we're supposed to sleep. Well, this time, different than the last interception, there was the same prison container torture ship, but we did have mattresses, even though they were flooded with water. The whole container area flooded with water, so they were wet. We were sleeping in wet mattresses, unless we were sleeping in the container, which was drier. And they did give us some of these cruddy little pieces of bread and cheese, those that weren't doing a hunger strike, and did not let us have covers. They just gave us some of our clothes back. That's the first interception. This interception was even more brutal. There were no mattresses. You were supposed to sleep there 1 or 2 nights. We threw us into this container, the same container area. Well, it's a little bit different. It was divided into 2 parts. The first mission, there were 181 people in one big container ship area. This time, there were about 260 of us, 265, 270 of us, and they divided the container area. One side, there were 200 people. It was already, we were already in the whole area, we occupied the entire area of the last mission with 181 people. We were still squashed in there. This time, they divided into two parts, and there are 200 people on one side could clearly mesh together like sardines, and then our side only had 70. So we threw us in this container area, no covers, no mattresses. We were to sleep on the hard floor inside the containers, because outside the containers we're always flooded with water. So we were always wet, we had wet shoes and so forth. And they did give us water, however, and they gave us the second interception just pieces of bread to eat. Nothing outside of that. Unfortunately, most of us were on a hunger strike, but anyway, those that needed to eat were just eating bread. And it was so cold because the Israeli authorities did not give us any of our clothes back, so there's no covers, and it's cold at night and freezing. So we kind of hunched in there together in the containers, and we did claim, and this time we did not manifest like in a demonstration way like the last mission. And we did that. We were told that it's better to negotiate. So on one side, the side that had 200 people, were trying to negotiate sending some of their people to our side, but then there was a girl who was shot on the other side, the side that had 200 people. I was on the side that had 70 people. The side that had 200 people. A girl was shot with some type of a bullet, taken inside and treated, but they wouldn't. The Israeli authorities in the prison ship didn't release her back to that group that had 200 people in that container. And they realized that they've got to negotiate. No more of these demonstrations. They're yelling and screaming, and they finally got her back. And then they were telling me, I was on the other side trying to organize our side to make demands, because the first mission we did demonstrations where they yelled and screamed at this in unison. This time the leader, her Kat, was there, and Ariadne telling me, trying to work on the other side, saying, this time don't do demonstration, negotiate. So you need to negotiate bringing at least 50 of our people over to your side, so it would be more equally dispersed, because they were just packed in there, right? And the other thing we needed was covers, we needed mattresses, and we needed more toilet paper. So I was designated on the other side, but this time we simply negotiated, and we asked for the commander. Many times the commander of the Shayatit 13 torture ship did come and spoke with me, with other people, in particular myself, and we talked to him about what we needed, those same demands, and they did give us toilet paper, and they gave both sides water. Outside of that, it was stark, it was cold, it was brutal. And then when we arrived, we were still staying in Crete. We were abducted in the Crete area, and this boat was still there. We were delivered to the Greek authorities, but it wasn't a calm delivery. They grabbed us, and it was really a really tough situation. That's the first interception, where we were thrown to the ground. They were dragged. So we were going to manifest, anyway, demonstrate not to cooperate with them, but people were kicked, and there were a lot of ribs broken and broken noses. The first intercept. The second interception, it's more of the same, but this time to get us off the boat, we were not going to Crete. We were not taken by the Greek authorities. The second interception, we were taken to Ashdod because we were closer to the Israeli port. Our boats were within, about 200 nautical miles. Our boat was one of the closest, about 125 nautical miles from the Gaza shore when we were intercepted. But all the boats that were intercepted this time we were taken to the torture ship, the one I was telling you about, and it was very stark this time, right? And we were very cold and so forth. They took us to Ashdod, to the Israeli port, and from the moment that we were delivered from this torture ship to the police there, it was just absolutely brutal. We were just constantly have to be bowing down, even when we're walking. And I tripped again, and they drugged me and pulled me over to the processing, drugged me, and then to the processing center, and then lifted me, then dropped me, the same thing as the last time. And but the worst was yet to come. instead of going to the processing center like we did after the Magdalene and the Handala, after we were kind of brutalized a little bit before, this time we were continuing to be brutalized. We were taken to an area that was pretty well, it wasn't clear cement. It was like rocks, it was like a dirt floor, and we were told to bow down. First we were handcuffed, and this was the thing that happened to me. Many handcuffs were really tight on purpose, and mine, what happened was they put the cuffs around my wrist, but one of the bags with my stuff in was caught in there, so it was super tight, and so I had to go down on my forehead, and my knees were on the ground too, in that bowing position, in sheer pain, and it lasted over an hour, and I started crying out a little bit, and my Hytham, with my buddy on the side, said, "Look, say something, man." And I said, "Yeah, they're not going to come. They're just going to beat me if I say something." But I had to. So after an hour and a half, I started yelling out medic, and they helped people around yell out. And finally, the Israeli soldiers came. I was surrounded by 5 soldiers. They looked at me, "What's wrong with you?" I showed them. I got up on me and and they're barking at us like dogs. And lay down again. Well, I have to show you. And I showed them my hands, and they were as big as balloons. And it was so painful, and they finally loosened the handcuffs, but I was thrown back to the ground in that position, and we stayed there for hours, sometimes 3 hours waiting. Finally, we got up, and through the whole processing, now we go to a processing center. We're interrogated by several people, asked to sign papers, and we're constantly required to bow down. And the same thing, crawling around or basically walking in a crouched position, in a submissive position, and we're not able to. If we were able to look up, they said, "Bow down," not look up, or they'd hit us. And and then I asked to go to the toilet. Haven't been to a toilet in several hours. And finally, I told the soldier as I was bowing down, waiting to be interrogated, I said, I'm gonna have to pee my pants. The soldier said, "Well, good, they'll just pee your pants." And it ended up setting me aside. Many people were processed and taken to the prison cars, because I've done this before, and I know what happens after you're processed. If you hadn't signed papers, and most people didn't, you go to prison. And most people were bypassing me, going to prison. I was just sitting there, and I asked the soldier, "What's going on?" He said, "Shut up." And finally, I had to literally pee in my pants. That was embarrassing and very uncomfortable. And I actually stayed in that way in 2 or 3 hours like that. But I realized why they set me aside, Mike, as they wanted me to be interrogated by a Mossad agent, because I had been there before, and I guess they recognized me and so forth. And a Mossad agent came and started to give me the party line. "What are you doing bringing humanitarian aid? We're giving Gaza people all they need. This is a waste of your time. And what you're doing," and I said, "No, that's not the information I have. They're still lacking a lot of food, water, medication. They're still dying of starvation. And we are here to comply with international law." And he balked at that and then said, "And what you're doing is directly helping the terrorists, Hamas, and all these and I obviously defended that position without going into too much detail, and finally said, "Well, think about it," and walked away. And then they took me to the prison bus, and then to prison was a whole gauntlet of more abuse that we can go into later, Mike.
Yeah, I am very disturbed. I mean, some of the survivors, or all the survivors, I'll read this, have recently exposed guns inserted into detainees, injection with unknown drugs, 15 plus reported rapes and sexual assaults. We heard from Juliette Lamont. She's an Australian filmmaker, about sexual abuse and violence she experienced. You saw the clip from Tucker, how the guy, because Tucker was questioning about the dogs raping prisoners, and he had heard that, and the person he was interviewing said he hadn't heard that, but knew of dogs that were armed and had cameras, and they would send those dogs into hospitals, and then they would kill people in the hospital remotely because there was a gun attached to the dog, and so forth. So it is obvious and quite irrefutable that torture is happening. You guys, you are going there, the Sumud is going there, the flotilla is going there just to do good. Simple as that. And to create the awareness. It would seem, though, that none of this is going to make, I mean, the ABC in Australia, which I have to pat on the back here, they do cover this and they do report it as fact. But most mainstream media and legacy around the world are not telling the true story. And so I find, this is just a question, I find that there's because we know that in Israel, they don't regard, I think they did a survey, 97% are behind Bibi. They don't regard the people, the Palestinians in Gaza, as human. And that's also from their politicians who have also been quoted saying so. But what makes it worse around the world, there's this apathy. I can't understand this. There's apathy that they don't care, just do not care. I mean, take away the Gaza thing, Frank. It shows you that humanity is definitely at a crisis point, if not too late, because to not care about thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of innocent people killed, tortured, maimed, communities, families obliterated. If the West pronounces itself to be Christian, I think if I was God, I would strike them all down, because this is appalling. It's how humanity has just turned its back on, first of all, the basic principles of Christianity, thou shalt not kill. And they ignore it. And you see the world leaders, it's like the doctors during COVID. Oh, well, we'll give you the jab. We know it's going to probably hurt you or kill you, but we've been told to do it. What people need to do now is understand and do something about this obliteration of human rights. Now, you guys, I mean, you were doctors and you were nurses and there were just ordinary people. Why in the hell, where is the international community jumping to your defence, Frank? I don't see it. I'm truly flabbergasted, and we have this propulsion of bullshit coming out from legacy media and a lot of independent media who I'm surprised with. They're behind Trump. They're behind the Israelis. Bombed the crap out of it. Do you despair?
Well, what you're saying is absolutely truthful. It's astounding. But I try to understand it, and I think one of the big reasons, if we just look at the United States, is this very clever, sophisticated propaganda, brainwashing methods used, especially to uncultivated people. People understand a lot. I'm originally American. I live in France now, but spent half my life in the United States, and I worked in back countries. I started out working on farms, wanted to do some international law, and they said, you can't do this on the farm, so you got to go to the city. And so, but I'm essentially a farm boy, a backcountry boy. And I saw these, good people, they're not bad people essentially, but they're totally uncultivated and easily manipulated. And these are the backbone of the Trump supporters, of course, and this type of propaganda that we received also during the Vietnam War. That's my generation. I was up for the draft during the Vietnam War times, and people were, and the news and the government was trying to convince us that the Vietnamese were less than human. We call them geeks or gooks, and this is part of the propaganda. So it makes you feel, it's designed to make you, I was never feeling better over it, designed to make people feel, well, it's justified by massacring these people, dumping napalm on especially in Cambodia, and the forest deforesting and killing people with the napalm and there's white phosphorus type of things. It gets under your skin and goes all the way to the bone, and a tremendous torturing type of chemicals makes it justified because these people are not human, and they're all communists. Of course, there's the word communist that it flies the red flag as soon as you hear that word in the United States, especially when it comes to uncultivated people. And most people, the far majority of Americans are uncultivated, but can I see that in Europe? Most Europeans are better educated, and you get almost a similar response across the board because those governments are also involved in supporting Israel. And also these definitions of anti-Semitism that are coming to the fore that I think the French government's in the process of adopting a rule saying that if you start criticizing Israel, it's synonymous being anti-Semitic, it'd be illegal, types of laws that many states have already adopted in the United States, and really playing on the uncultivated nature. The Europeans are sort of dumbing down. They used to be far more better educated, like the Americans a bit, are so involved with public media and images, are not reading much, are not thinking much, are more easily manipulated and subject to this type of propaganda. So that's the type of one understanding, is that people are subject to very, very strong brainwashing and propaganda with respect to the Palestinians. But then when finally they're starting to see the light, and unfortunately because of non-Palestinians were tortured and treated like worse than animals, like during this last interception, people are finally saying, wow, and Palestinians have been telling us they've been treated like this or worse. Maybe what they're saying is credible. That people are starting to wake up, Mike, but I'm not in despair to the extent I feel hope. It's really about what has happened today is money, power, and greed has really risen to the top through fear, through misunderstandings, propaganda, lack of education. These quotes unquote values have risen to the top, and humanitarian principles have pretty well lingering on the bottom. And so it's my challenge and our challenge, isn't it, Mike, and your challenge, a very important media outlet to enlighten people about the truth, is to right the plane. We're in a nosedive. We're in this type of a uncultivated, hateful, money garnering, money hungering type of mentality. That money, power, nourished by greed is kind of flying high, but it's really a nosedive that we're gonna right the plane and hopefully move forward with more education and more realizing that these activists, the flotilla, and they're all across the board. We've got doctors, lawyers, workers, all across the board have a lot to lose. And when people look at our lives and say, well, geez, you've got kids, you've got a job, you could lose it all. And if we're willing to even lose our lives, then people are starting to wake up to the fact that, well, that's might be credible what they're doing if they have a lot to do. We're just hanging around, nothing to do, just hanging out and going on a boat cruise, have nothing else. That's something else. But no, we as flotilla members, almost all of us have so much to lose, but it's a necessary risk to right the plane, because a full-blown genocide is all of our responsibility to do something about in the world, whether it be in Palestine. There's issues in Africa, there are issues in other countries too that we all need to address, that we'll hopefully get to. But we're focusing, most of the flotilla people are focusing on the Palestinian massacres, and we can't really do everything, but we're also trying to enlighten the world, as the Palestinians are. Palestinians, here you've got this father who's lost his sons, his daughter, his wife, maybe his mother or father, saying, we still want to rid ourselves of this occupation, of these vicious killers. We want to free Palestine, but we also see in the world today, these are the same oppressors for many oppressed societies in the world, whether it be in Cuba or the Amazon or Chiapas or in Colombia, at the head of which big businesses are controlling the world through money, power, and greed. They're the same enemies. So the Palestinians, even though they're suffering, they're dying of starvation, and they've lost many members of their families, they're still saying, we really want to encourage the world. We want to be a model for the world to also free itself from the same oppressors. And so this is why it's so important that what we're doing with Gaza, we're trying to help the Palestinians free themselves so the world can free itself, that we don't let go, because it's not just about Palestine, it's about the world.
What's your thoughts on this one? National Security Minister Ben Gvir physically forced his way onto a Navy ship last week, where he went there to film a controversial video of himself taunting Gaza flotilla participants. And I've seen video of Ben Gvir. He's not a particularly amiable person. He's I would probably describe as pretty ugly, to say the least, in his personality. How do we break the mould? Because the reports that are coming from Israel is that most of them support Bibi Netanyahu on what he's doing. 97%, I think the figures were, or close to it. And then we have Ben Gvir doing what he's done, taunting the prisoners. And I've played footage before of people kneeling and head to the floor. And it's absolutely appalling. Does that indicate that the opportunities for peace between Israel and say the Palestinians, and Israel and Lebanon, and Israel and most of those with any brains, do you think the opportunities for peace are quite limited? Because normally you need the support of the peoples to say this is wrong, we have to stop it. If 97% of people living in Israel support what's happening, it would suggest that this will continue until they decide to stop of their own fruition.
Absolutely, Mike. This is very unsettling. But I think the people are basically they're subject to the type of brainwashing we were talking about. But what happens is Netanyahu and Ben Gvir are very clever. Whenever there's an issue, for instance, this video, which we have to thank Ben Gvir for this video, because it brought home the point of how viciously we were treated, and that bringing it to the world's eyes, even by a member of the Israeli government doing so. But I think, well, there was a vote of non-confidence, right? And I don't think it's necessarily the flotilla that was a catalyst for it, maybe among other things. So there is a lack of support for government. But if people are saying, oh, we have a chance now, and people don't understand that Netanyahu, he gets his mandate. He has a very clever way of maintaining power. So even though there's no elections, the chances are he'll probably maintain power. And using people's sentiment. Well, how does he use that? Just like the United States did when it was attacking Iraq, and it was the second attack, this time, really trying to oust Saddam Hussein, when all these stories of erroneous stories of the Saddam Hussein's first strike capability, nuclear capability otherwise, especially in Europe, and trying to get people that were on the fence about this invasion of Iraq to agree with it, which ended up happening after Powell made his speech before the UN, erroneous positions of nuclear facilities or weapons that Iraq could use, which was all erroneous. Well, that's sort of, let's turn the page and get back to Israel and Palestine. A lot of these, the doubts of the people are sort of gelled together to support the government, because they always ring that fear chain. Said, if we do not defend ourselves, it's going to end up like the Holocaust. We're going to lose our majority in Israel. You know what's going to happen? Palestinians are going to massacre us, and they're already a lot of countries around us that are they always pull this fear chain by saying they are organizing, preparing. We need to be strong. And the biggest enemy of the Palestinians, that are helped by terrorists, and they bring this all together and bring the fear into the Israeli people, that they feel they have no choice but to support a very military-oriented country to protect us, so that we don't end up like World War II, like the Holocaust. It's a very clever manipulation. It's unsettling that people, 97% of the people support these atrocities. But if you see the context of them, how they manipulate these events, then you understand how many people can support this. But keep in mind, Mike, there's one thing I'd like to bring up that we did bring up a little bit, and this is important. The Israeli soldiers and the government make no attempts to cover up their atrocities against the flotilla people in particular. And when Ben-Gvir made that video, you know what he's trying to do. It's clear. He's been either told or it's part of his own policy. We're really concerned now about the flotilla. It's really galvanizing the world against us and revealing what the U.S. and Israel are doing to the world. We're really screwing the world. We're controlling the world with the military-industrial complex. One of the victims, of course, is Palestine, but many others in the world, all the oppressed people are mostly subject to these same big businesses that are in control. And they're saying, but we really want one aspect of revealing this to the world to be stopped, and that is the flotilla. So all this information about cruelty and the video of Ben-Gvir are really designed to deter people from being recruited to the flotilla. There are people who will not be part of the flotilla because of this recent viciousness, but then people like me who are angered by this viciousness and still willing to subject myself to necessary risk and still willing to continue the flotilla. The next flotilla may be in August or September. In spite of the enhanced violence each time, who knows, the next time there might be some killings of flotilla people, but we've got to take these necessary risks to do what we can, because we're in a position to do direct action to stop the genocide. You know, what you're doing, Mike, and the media is just as important. I wouldn't even call it indirect action, because without the media, what we're doing is useless. And many people around the world that are doing boycotts and demonstrations, it's just as important. But we just, in the flotilla, people just happen to be in position to engage in this type of direct action, and we're no better or worse than any other activist doing what they can do to stop this genocide.
The Global Sumud Flotilla coalition submitted a formal complaint to the International Criminal Court, the ICC, accusing senior Israeli military and political leaders of war crimes, crimes against humanity, torture, and acts of genocide. What's the process now with the ICC?
Yeah, very good question. In fact, I was in Istanbul when the group was being formed, and since I have experience before the ICC, I volunteered to be a part of it, but they had already chosen their people, all pre-approved, and so I wasn't part of the team who went to The Hague. And basically what happened was they engaged in informal discussions with the prosecutors, and probably Israeli lawyers were present as well. The right of defense probably allowed them or required them to be present. So that's the first stage. Just discussions. Maybe, I'm not sure, I haven't got the result of the discussion to determine how open the prosecutors would be to add our claims to ongoing cases like mine. I have an ongoing case that was filed 5 years ago for war crimes. El-Haq has several cases, and other lawyers have cases that are still active. In other words, we got a provisional measure. Well, we first got one victory, and that is jurisdiction. That was in 2021. And then recently, after October 7th, finally the International Criminal Court judge and the prosecutor, Karim Khan, woke up to the fact there is the genocide. We need the arrest warrants that we've been asking for years against Netanyahu, and he received one, and so did Gant. But still the case is ongoing. So what they're probably trying to discuss, do we add what happened to Flotilla to the ongoing case for war crimes against Netanyahu and other particulars? Because we have to realize this is a criminal court. You are prosecuting individuals. You cannot prosecute a state in a criminal court. How do you send a state to jail? So these are individuals, and so probably they're trying to decide the best strategy, kind of get feedback from the prosecutor as how they can go about whether to file a separate case for war crimes and crimes against humanity against Israeli officials for what happened to the flotilla participants, or add it to a case or several cases that are already pending.
Can you tell me what the state of Gaza is at the moment, and also in regards to food and medical aid? Is it still deplorable? Because, yeah, again, the world is just, I mean, it's like the conflict with Iran, and the world is heightened anxiety, watching with interest it's almost gone dead. Now, the situation for the global community hasn't changed. It seems like our attention span, we have a deficit disorder. I mean, because we're just not at all interested. And so when it comes to the abomination that is being happening to the people of Gaza, because we don't hear much about it. So is Gaza still, as was, terrible? People are dying, people have been killed, innocent people are being killed, starvation, no medical, or has it improved at all?
Well, it has improved to the extent that through the Rafah Gate and Kerem Shalom, according to the Israelis, and I've heard the Palestinians, they're also receiving a little more food, but I heard that to really reach the minimum needs of the Gazan Palestinians, you need more than 1,000 trucks per day. And I think these varied analyses come through with saying that there's still, a minimum was supposed to be 500 to 600 trucks a day. I think it's far less than that are arriving into Gaza after the inspection, whether it be through the Rafah Gate or Kerem Shalom. So the Gaza people are getting much less food, water, medication than needed for their survival. So people are still dying of malnutrition, of lack of medication, and so forth. And Gaza is still being bombed by Israelis, even though there's this artificial ceasefire. The situation is grave. It's still very, very serious, even though the Israelis try to convince us otherwise. And also the West Bank is being attacked more, and Israeli settlers are attacking more of the Palestinians and taking more land and destroying Palestinian property and killing and injuring Palestinians, as in Gaza, and getting away with it. It has not changed, and I think, well, here's my assessment of this, Mike. Have you ever spoken to someone, whether it be young or older, and it's strange, I spoke with people yesterday about this, I was invited to an event in Paris, and it's about really in support of some of the children who've been, or adolescents that have been abused and some killed by the French police. And then they brought all these movements together, like the Palestinian issue and the violence that the Palestinians are subject to, whether they be in France or in Palestine. And I spoke with some of these people, youthful people, very intelligent, but I noticed that they would look away. And it's just an assessment I've made. More and more people are so used to be on their phones and on the YouTube and switching images so much, it's hard for them to really give you their undivided attention for a very long period. It's just really attention span. And then we look at the world stage, where the journalists are not telling us to ignore Palestine, but saying shift your thoughts to a hot issue, and that's Iran, and tend to focus on the Iranian conflict and other conflicts where the Palestinians' attack on Palestine is continuing. As I said before, nothing has really changed. It's still a grave situation in Gaza and the West Bank, and getting worse and worse, while people are focused on something else. So the attention span, I think there's essentially an issue with that, Mike, you hit upon, that I observed the other day. And then with the journalists are focusing on the hot news and so forth, and they're told to do so. And at the same time, Israel is benefiting and enjoying this distraction to continue bludgeoning Gaza and the West Bank when the world's attention is elsewhere. And that's one of our jobs, and your job too, I'm sure, Mike, and what you're doing is bringing people's attention back to certain atrocities and so forth that it hasn't stopped, to inform people to stay on it and do what you can to stop these atrocities.
I always picture a child, it doesn't matter how old, and the fear in the child's eyes, and we've seen video and pictures of dead children and terrified children, and I cannot get that out of my mind.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at over 9,000 Palestinians, and they call Palestinian in jail in Israel as terrorists, but they're hostages, just like the hostages that were taken in 7 October. Then you've got more than 400 children. I'm thinking, my God, and there's something we didn't go over. This time, after the second interception, we were thrown into cells in Kitsiot prison. That was the same prison in the Negev Valley that we were thrown in the first mission. But these cells had no water in them and no toilets. So if you want to go to the bathroom, you have to ask the guard. And like, for instance, it was 7 p.m., I asked the guard to go to the toilet and never let me go to the toilet at all. And even during the next day, we were rooted out of the cell. No toilet, and water we asked for and finally got it early the next morning. And these are the type of cells that Palestinians, I'm sure, are put in Kitsiot. Kitsiot prison has over 43,000 Palestinian prisons, the biggest prison for Palestinians, I think, in Gaza and in Israel. And all these, I'm thinking we were absolutely traumatized because when we were thrown into the cell, we still had our handcuffs on. We were bowing down and the cell was closed. We couldn't really get out and do anything. And finally, they took our handcuffs off. And I'm thinking, the children here? We were totally traumatized as adults. And some of us, as myself, I've been in prison, 6 or 7 times already, and 3, 4 times before that in Israeli prisons. And my God, there's stories of kids getting released and being absolutely needing psychiatric therapy. And if they survived the prison, some have died, as a lot of adults have died in prison as well, in Israeli prisons, and going, my God, let's keep it up, Mike. Let's keep the world's attention focused on this. And finally, hopefully, with the global attention on the, it's not about us individually, we're just conduits, to the Palestinian people. Maybe we can also, as the Palestinians want, to supply a model for all oppressed people so that we actually can continue doing something about this in our time, Mike. We've got to do it, and at the same time, maybe we can even educate ourselves to bring the humanitarian interest to the top instead of this money, power, and greed thing that's taken a hold of the world. This awful selfishness for money, power, and so forth. That the United States and Israel at the top of this whole spirit, the military-industrial complex, money, power, and greed thing. They're at the top, trying to control the world, and it's all about money. Really, they're making more money this way, and it justifies everything. The settlers in the settlements, American businesses in the settlements, establishing in the settlements like HP and so forth. I've spoken to some of them, and I said, well, I asked them, doesn't it bother you that you're on stolen land? Your business in a settlement in the West Bank is on stolen land? And they said, well, yeah, but we're making so much money, and so that's supposed to be the end of the conversation, just because their profit margin is so high. That should justify it, man. No more discussion. I'm going, wow. We need to focus on our hearts, on our unconditional love, on our humanitarian interests, and we need to get us back. We need to right that plane, Mike, and we will. Maybe through another generation, but if we give up on it and we just join up, saying it's impossible, so let's just join up with everyone else and not fight it, then it's going to get worse, and it's going to explode. So a big reason is to for the flotilla is to try to convince people within their own countries to revolt against their country, this whole money spirit, but also to revolt against their countries, such as Americans, such as French citizens, because I'm French American, to pressure their government to stop enabling the genocide in their names, because they're paying taxes. So I believe that if no one is contesting, if someone does not contest this in the United States, that's aware of what's going on in Palestine, then they are an accomplice, indirectly an accomplice. And as you say, these people that have something to say or do, whether it be indirectly or direct action, are an accomplice. And in a way, you could say they're going to pay for this. And if you could bring in spirituality, whether it be a physical hell or not, they're going to be in hell over this. As the Israeli government is, the United States government, even though they're sitting pretty now, they've got lots of money and power, they're going to pay a high price for this, whether it be spiritually, psychologically, physically, eventually, and their families will too. And so all the French people that are not saying anything about the French government sending arms to Israel to enable this genocide will also pay the price. I'm convinced of this.
The one image, and it has an effect on me, a terrible, terrible effect. The image was this father was holding a child, and there's two images. and you could see holding, and the next image there was no bottom part of his son, and it was terrible. It was absolutely one image that has always stuck in my mind. How has this changed you? And because for me, I mean, I have to admit that I was pretty ignorant until October happened, and then I actually, because we knew what was happening, but you always put it into a compartment, and that. And when the imagery came out of what was happening to innocent people, and supported by the West, I cannot accept it. I just will never accept it. And I think they are particularly evil people, and those that kill innocent people do need to go to hell. And there is no forgiveness for you. I do not forgive you. And I think the world should not forgive them. But with yourself, you've actually been not to the front line, but you've been there fighting for the people of Gaza, for the Palestinians. You're fighting for a just cause for humanity. You have put your neck and your life on the line. How have you changed?
Well, actually, Mike, this all came way back in actually 1978. I had a dream that this is something I should do. And I tried then to get into Palestine from Paris. It was in Paris where I was studying, and never got there. And then 13 years later, ended up being a lawyer in France and a professor. And then I finally was able to go there and realized that my dream that I had, it wasn't just a fantasy. Like a lot of dreams are kind of like fantasy. It was really something truthful that I should do. And so from 2005 on, I've been faithful to that calling. And I feel that my empathy for struggling and suffering people started when I was very young at home, where my dad used to beat me silly for contesting things. I mean, he was a great man in other ways, but I was very much abused, and I always had empathy for struggling, helpless people. So when I had this dream about Palestine, even though I was in Sorbonne University studying philosophy in a beautiful situation in Paris, I was still disillusioned with big cities and games and so forth, and this dream told me get out of Paris and go there to Palestine. 1978, I ended up finally going there. So this is really about me answering the question. It really hasn't necessarily changed me. I've had desires to make it a better world as much as I can in a small corner of my world. And when I see something that I can do something, it just so happens it's Palestine, but I see things happening in Africa, atrocities also committed. People, often the Israelis tell us, why are you focusing on Palestine? Just go down to Africa and you'll see even worse atrocities. Well, because this has happened to be the one I'm working on, and you can't spread yourself too thin, and hopefully other people will address those places in the world so we can right the plain world globally, because the military-industrial complex and societies, big businesses, at the head of which are the U.S. and Israel, tend to be responsible for a lot of these atrocities, either directly or indirectly, the same enemy. So it hasn't really changed me, Mike. I've always had the desire to work on behalf of helpless, victims. And when I attached to the Palestinian struggle, it just really enhanced my desire to do that. And since I'm like in Paris, it wasn't that far away, I could get involved. And when direct action came, basically after 2020, I was banned. So I couldn't go back into Israel and Palestine. As you said before, I'd organized events there, conferences and demonstrations. I was banned. So I figured, well, maybe when I saw the ad about the Freedom Flotilla actually going there by sea, I won't have to go through any Israeli checkpoints, and maybe I'll be able to get into Gaza to see my Palestinian friends, because I can't see them anymore. And it was an opportunity to do that, even though I haven't got into Gaza yet. I've been in communication with many people in Gaza and the West Bank, and just the fact that we're making a try to do something, to right the plane for Palestine, it gives them a great jolt of moral support, because they really feel, especially the Gazan Palestinians, especially during the Iranian conflict, that the world's forgotten them. They're completely abandoned.
Nicely said. If somebody wants to be a part of something good, or just to contact you, how do they do that?
They can go on my website, Frank Romano 11 Terror 5th 5, or just Google me, Frank Romano Palestine. I'm on Facebook. Everything is an open space, transparent. And I do hope, and for Love and Terror in the Middle East, they can go into the book and even communicate with me that way. That's usually the easiest way people do it. Hopefully they can feel free to converse with me. They don't have to agree with things I said. Continue this dialogue, and thank you, Mike, for letting me be on your program again to share this with you, and hopefully we'll be able to talk again. But it's pretty easy to get in touch with me, and I hope we can pursue this discussion in the future, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah, you are a great man, a great human, good bloke, as we would say in the UK or in Australia. And at this stage, I'd love to give you a big hug, but I won't do that because you're too far away. Although I could pop
I'd like to hug you too, Mike. Really.
You're
we'll hug you someday.
You're a very good person, Dr. Frank Romano, here on the World Today. We'll do more tomorrow. Probably tomorrow we'll have the protagonist, have a panel. But until then, be kind to your neighbours. I'm very, very disturbed about what's happening, by the way, to the human race, and to the people of Gaza, to the Palestinians, to the innocents in Iran. It's just deplorable, very emotional, very sad. This is the World Today. Until tomorrow, have a good one.